This is part two of a little snippet about elders. I'm leaning very heavily on a chap who's got an article, 10 Things You Need to Know About Elders. We thought about 5 last week. We're going to think about another 5 this week. But first of all, I'd like to read to you from 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 1 to 5. So I exhort the elders among you as a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, as well as a partaker in the glory that is going to be revealed. Shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory. Likewise, you who are younger, be subject to the elders. Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility towards one another. For God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Hopefully this can be a guide to people listening in, and also us as a church, and churches do always need to think about this, is our leadership and this position of elders. When we talk about elders, we're not talking about the elderly necessarily. We're not talking about, sometimes the idea of it's elders, you can think immediately of people with white hair and flowing beards and stuff. We're talking about those in leadership. And we're saying that as a Bible-centered church, our conviction is that leadership should be a plural, ideally a plural of elders called by the congregation. So we're a congregational church. We believe that every member of the church has to have input and to be part of things, but it's elder-led congregation appointed by the church to serve, shepherd, and lead the flock. The pastor is one of those elders, but all the elders are pastors together. Whilst looking to the Lord to lead us, if it's not possible to have elders, you can keep going as a gospel church. But some idea of a shared leadership just helps in so many ways. Obviously, no system planned by humans or used by humans is going to be faultless. We're sinners. But this is God's pattern for the care of his church. And it just brings us on to okay, what do elders do? So the first thing I want to say is elders must be able to teach. It's a teaching office. 1 Timothy chapter 3 verse 2, the qualification of elders must be apt to teach. And the reason for this is so that elders can build up the church in sound doctrine, so they can refute false teachers, and there can be a solidity, a care about the doctrine and the gospel stance of the church. Now, that teaching can take many different forms. Somebody may be good on one-to-one or a small group. It doesn't mean that every elder is able to do a 24-week expository series, or there can be different ways. Somebody may be good at leading devotions or good explaining the gospel. You don't need a PhD, but the men who lead the church together do need to be able to explain sound teaching and discern what gospel teaching is. They do need to hold to the words. So it's not a management office, it's a teaching office. They're devoted to prayer and to the words. You did get 1 Timothy 5 verse 15, verse 17. Paul does talk about verse 17. Let the elders who rule well be considered worthy of double honour, especially those who labour in preaching and teaching. So sometimes people talk about some churches will have ruling elders, those who are more about the leading of the church, and those who are set aside for preaching and teaching. Okay, but I think generally, however it's balanced, that the eldership is about the teaching of the church. So you need to think about somebody standing for eldership, discerning, to think, is this man, is he able to teach? Does he have a grasp on the gospel, on the doctrines of the faith? So that is a big thing. But it doesn't, you need to hear me right, it doesn't necessarily mean that elder needs to be able to give a Sunday sermon, but able to teach, something to discern. The other thing to say is, second thing I want to say is, elders must lead. So, shepherding and leading go together. They are overseers. They have oversight of a local congregation. And that means they have a measure of authority over the local church. So it says here, 1 Peter 5, verse 2, that you would shepherd the flock of God that's among you, not for shameful gain or eagerly, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. So the authority of elders is not absolute, it's not unquestionable, it's not to be in a domineering manner. It's according to God's word and under the shepherding care of Christ. It's a loving, kind authority, but God doesn't expect the church to submit to the leadership of their elders and their leaders. Hebrews 13, verse 17. Submit to your elders. This needs picking apart. Now, we live in a culture that is more and more wary of power, and rightly so. Power can be abused, and power to rule over somebody can be a terrifying thing. So leadership in the church should never be a worldly power that's over other people. You must do as we say because we're the elders. So you get the sense in the New Testament that Jesus absolutely revolutionizes what power is like. Jesus talks about the greatest among you being servants, about you're not to lord it over others like the Gentiles. But authority is still a good thing. Authority is a good gift of God. I recently heard somebody put it like this. In the Garden of Eden, before sin, you could have had an orchestra with everybody, imagine, before the fall, that the human race had grown so much that you could have an orchestra. Okay, hypothetical situation. You would still have all the instruments. Even in a perfect society, you would still need a conductor. You would still need somebody to lead it. So authority can be a good thing. And in fact, the authority of the conductor enables the orchestra to work together and produce something beautiful. That's an authority that is being used to serve and help. And biblical authority is more like that. It's not so much authority over the church, it's authority for the church. So almost the ideal situation with pastoral, and I kind of have to grow this, becoming a younger pastor, you're like, all right, you've got to do what I say, everybody jump in. It's not quite like that. Authority comes over time. Like, who are you going to trust more? The new pastor or the family in the church that have been around for years and have been godly and served well? Well, like on paper you may say, well, our pastor, but in terms of actual soft authority, the influence is going to be those who've been around and served more. You're looking that your leaders that are there in the church have that kind of authority that is proved over time, that is loving and trustworthy. Paul talks about how he was amongst the Thessalonians like a father, like a mother, a paternal, a caring authority. So do you know what I'm saying? But elders must lead. There's a leadership. So there's certain decisions that where it needs to be called, let's do this. But that's not to be an oppressive authority. Basically, your leadership in the church, your elders are like to be the stage in the Neath Goffer. Everybody walks on them, but they enable everybody to play their parts. They're the platform on what the whole church is to be, rather than being seen and visible necessarily all the time. They provide that authority. There's more I could say about that, but elders must be able to teach. They must lead. Third thing, eldership begins at home in all the qualities of elders in 1 Timothy 3 and Titus. How elders are at home, how they lead in the home, show how they should lead, whether they're able to lead in God's church. So a one-woman man, a faithful husband, if they have children, they're to parent well, children not to be out of control. Obviously, nobody is perfect. In the home life, we need to be merciful and caring, but leadership of a household is really important. Does this person show that? Fourth thing, and controversially in our day and age, and this is hotly contested, but this is where we stand as a church. Eldership is male only. A one-woman only man is a man. And although men and women can serve together in partnership in a variety of roles and in a variety of ways, leadership in marriage and leadership in the church is male. And I could show the passages, but 1 Timothy, Titus, Paul's stance on these things show that. I could say more on that, but I won't at this juncture. You'll hear me again on that. But just to say, that's not chauvinism, that's not sexism, that is how the New Testament says leadership is to be in the church. There's to be this complementation between men and women. It's worth saying, but how an elder treats women is really important. Do elders listen to women? Do they affirm them in their roles and tasks? Are they approachable? All of that is important. Okay. And the last thing I want to say about elders, I've made such a song and dance about elders. Leadership is so important, but elders are not Jesus. Leaders are not Jesus. It's Jesus who's the chief shepherd. Any leader in the church is an under shepherds. The best man and the best woman is a man or a woman at best. And that's true in church leadership. Only servants. And so the leaders that we want to be people who know that Jesus is the good shepherd, who know their own faults and failings and sin, who are humble and who rest on Christ and his goodness and grace. It's Jesus who's the good shepherd of his sheep. I hope